Trading doesn't demand perfection, it demands psychological balance. Most traders believe they're fighting the market, but the real battle is internal, the silent war between fear and greed. These two emotions don't show up on your chart, yet they dictate every hesitation, every rush, every late exit, every early entry, and every blown account. The market isn't your enemy, your uncontrolled reactions are. The traders who rise above the masses aren't the ones with the fanciest indicators or the most screens. They're the ones who learn to master the emotional forces that distort perception and destroy discipline. Fear and greed create illusions. Fear makes you see danger that doesn't exist, forcing you to exit profitable trades too early or avoid valid setups because of a loss you experienced earlier. Greed does the opposite. It convinces you that the market owes you something, that a winning streak will continue forever, that you can risk more just this once, that you can squeeze one more candle out of a move that's already exhausted. Both emotions push you out of a probabilistic mindset and trap you in a world where you react, not think, where you hope, not plan. To overcome these forces, you must build a structured mental framework, rules that operate no matter how emotional the situation becomes, rules that keep you grounded when price spikes and your pulse rises, rules that keep you patient when opportunities seem scarce, rules that protect you from yourself. Most traders think rules are restrictive. The truth is they create freedom. Freedom from impulsive decisions, freedom from emotional chaos, freedom from the exhausting cycle of fear during losses and greed during wins. Without rules, you trade according to how you feel. And how you feel in the moment will almost always betray you. The secret isn't to eliminate fear and greed. You can't. The secret is to neutralize their influence by committing to a set of principles that guide your behavior far more consistently than your emotions ever could. Every winning trader understands that discipline isn't a personality trait, it's a trained response. It's cultivated by clarity. It's maintained by repetition. And it becomes unshakable when your rules define your actions instead of your emotions. These secret rules aren't about predicting the market, they're about shaping your mindset. They are designed to protect your capital, sharpen your focus, strengthen your patience, and transform your relationship with uncertainty. Because the market rewards the trader who can remain neutral when everyone else is panicking, rational when everyone else is euphoric, and disciplined when everyone else is improvising. If you're willing to adopt these rules, not just read them but internalize them, you'll begin trading from a place of confidence, calmness, and clarity. You'll stop fighting your emotions and start understanding them. You'll stop forcing trades and start following your edge. You'll stop reacting to the market and start responding to it with intention. Mastering your emotional triggers is the foundation of true trading stability, because every decision you make, entry, exit, risk size, patience, hesitation, aggression, flows directly from the way your mind interprets market information. Most traders underestimate how deeply emotions shape their perception. They look at the chart and believe they are seeing pure data, clean price action, and objective structure. But what they're actually seeing is filtered through their fears, desires, memories, expectations, and impulses. Until you learn to identify and understand these internal filters, your trading will always feel unpredictable, inconsistent, and heavily dependent on the mood or experience of the moment. An emotional trigger is simply a stimulus, like a sudden candle spike, a losing streak, a missed entry, a profit running away without you, or an unexpected reversal that activates a conditioned response inside you. That response might be panic, frustration, revenge trading, overconfidence, self-doubt, or the urge to make back what you lost. Every trader has these triggers, but very few take the time to map them. Instead, they focus on strategy, indicators, or technical knowledge, believing more information will fix their inconsistency. But inconsistency comes from within. Two traders can use the same strategy with completely different outcomes because one reacts emotionally while the other responds consciously. To master your emotional triggers, you first have to identify them in real time. This means developing the awareness to notice what changes inside you the moment the chart does something unexpected. Maybe your heart rate increases, your breathing shortens, your shoulders tense. Maybe you feel an urge to act quickly, even though you know your plan requires patience. The body reacts before the mind processes, and if you don't become aware of that reaction, it will make the decision for you. That decision will almost always be impulsive, defensive, or exaggerated. The market punishes impulsiveness with losses, and losses amplify your emotional reactions even further, creating a destructive feedback loop. Understanding emotional triggers means understanding the stories you attach to your trades. A losing trade isn't just a small financial outcome, It becomes proof of inadequacy, failure, or incompetence if you've conditioned yourself to interpret losses emotionally. A winning trade isn't just a positive result. It becomes evidence of superiority or invincibility if you allow greed to amplify your self-image. Both reactions distort your ability to stay neutral. Neutrality is what allows traders to execute their edge without hesitation or overconfidence. Emotional attachment removes neutrality and replaces it with exaggerated meaning. Once meaning enters your decision-making, trading becomes personal rather than probabilistic. Most emotional triggers stem from deeply rooted beliefs. If you fear being wrong, every trade becomes a threat. If you fear losing money, every small fluctuation feels dangerous. If your self-worth is tied to performance, every outcome becomes emotional rather than statistical. Mastering emotional triggers requires you to confront these internal beliefs and recognize that the market does not validate or invalidate you. A trade is just a trade. A loss is just a predefined cost of doing business. A win is just an example of the system working as intended. When you stop attaching meaning to outcomes, emotions lose their power over you. Another essential part of mastering emotional triggers is cultivating emotional resilience. Resilience does not mean suppressing emotions or pretending you don't feel them. Suppression creates pressure, and pressure eventually erupts in destructive behavior, oversized positions, revenge trades, premature exits, or chasing moves. Resilience means allowing the emotion to exist while refusing to let it dictate your actions. You feel the fear, but you still follow your plan. You feel the excitement, but you still respect your risk. You feel the frustration, but you still wait for your setup. This separation between feeling and acting is what defines a professional mindset. To reach this level of control, you must rely on structure. Structure is what keeps emotions from creating chaos. Structure means predefined rules, predefined risks, predefined conditions for entries and exits, and predefined procedures for dealing with losses or uncertainty. Structure acts as a barrier between your emotions and your execution. When a trader lacks structure, emotions rush in to fill the empty space. When a trader has structure, emotions have nowhere to attach themselves because the decisions are already made before the trade even begins. One of the most powerful ways to master emotional triggers is through a documented post-trade analysis. After the session ends, examine what triggered you and how you reacted. Were you afraid to pull the trigger because of a recent loss? Did you take a trade too early because you feared missing out? Did a sudden spike cause panic that wasn't justified by your plan? Did a winning streak create overconfidence that pushed you into risks you normally wouldn't take? By analyzing these responses, you begin to recognize patterns. Once you recognize patterns, you can break them. Once you break them, you regain control. Emotional mastery also requires redefining the purpose of trading. When trading becomes a way to compensate for boredom, pressure, financial desperation, ego, or entertainment, emotional triggers multiply. But when trading becomes a strategic execution of probabilities, where each outcome is just one event in a long series, emotions begin to fade. You trade not to feel something, not to prove something, not to fix something, but to execute a statistical edge over time. This shift in purpose radically reduces the emotional weight of each individual trade. One of the biggest challenges traders face is the illusion of control. Many believe that if they try hard enough, analyze long enough, or watch the chart closely enough, they can force the outcome they desire. This illusion creates massive emotional triggers because reality constantly contradicts it. The market moves independently of your desires, and any attempt to control it leads to emotional friction. Mastery comes from accepting uncertainty, not fighting it. When you accept uncertainty, triggers lose power because they can no longer surprise you. Every outcome becomes expected, even if it's undesired. Mastering emotional triggers ultimately transforms the way you engage with the market. You begin to see the chart as information rather than threat or opportunity for validation. You see risk as a neutral component rather than a danger. You see losses as business expenses rather than emotional wounds. You begin to act from clarity rather than impulse, from patience rather than urgency, from confidence rather than fear. Trading your rules instead of your feelings is the shift that separates long-term winners from temporary survivors. Most traders believe they're following a system, but in reality, they're following their emotions disguised as decisions. The chart moves a little faster than expected, and suddenly discipline becomes optional. A candle retraces deeper than usual, and fear begins rewriting your plan in real time. A winning streak creates a sense of invincibility, and you start overriding your own risk parameters to maximize the opportunity. These moments feel logical while they're happening, but they are emotional reactions pretending to be strategy. Trading your rules means eliminating this emotional interference by committing to a structure, framework that guides your decisions independently of how you feel. When you follow your feelings, every trade is influenced by what recently happened. A loss triggers hesitation, doubt, or overprotection. A win triggers confidence, aggression, or greed. A missed setup triggers frustration or chasing. A sudden move triggers fear of missing out or fear of being wrong. Emotions anchor you to the immediate moment, making your trading reactive rather than systematic. Rules do the opposite. They anchor you to a long-term edge. They create consistency because they operate the same way in every condition, regardless of your mood, your recent performance, or the market's short-term volatility. For rules to guide you, they must be clear, objective, and written. A rule cannot depend on interpretation or personal judgment in the moment, because judgment is exactly what emotions distort. If you can bend a rule based on how you feel, it isn't a rule. It's a suggestion. True rules are binary. Either conditions are met or they are not. You either enter or you don't. You either exit or you wait. You risk the predefined percentage or you stand aside. The firmness of rules is what protects you from acting out the emotional impulses that sabotage performance. Trading your rules also requires understanding why those rules exist. When you know the logic behind a rule, you're more likely to follow it when emotions try to convince you otherwise. If your rule defines a maximum risk of 1% per trade, it's not arbitrary. It's designed to ensure that a losing streak doesn't damage your capital beyond recovery. If your rule says to avoid trading in the middle of a range, it's because the probabilities are poor. If your rule requires a specific confirmation candle before entry, it's because that confirmation historically improves your win rate. Knowing the purpose behind your rules strengthens your commitment to them and makes emotional impulses easier to resist. Following your rules means embracing the fact that not every trade will be profitable and not every setup will play out perfectly. Many traders abandon rules because they expect rules to guarantee outcomes. But rules don't guarantee outcomes, they guarantee consistency. Consistency is what produces profitability over a series of trades. Emotions chase instant gratification. Rules build long-term results. When you trade your rules, you stop obsessing over individual outcomes because you trust the process you're executing. When you trade your feelings, every outcome becomes personal, dramatic, and magnified. One of the biggest obstacles to trading your rules is the human tendency to seek comfort. Emotional decisions rarely come from logic. They come from the desire to avoid discomfort. Fear pushes you to avoid losing. Greed pushes you to avoid missing out. Ego pushes you to avoid being wrong. Impatience pushes you to avoid waiting. Comfort-seeking behavior is incompatible with rule-based trading because the market constantly presents situations that feel uncomfortable but are necessary to execute your edge. Taking a valid setup after 3 consecutive losses is uncomfortable. Letting a trade hit your stop instead of closing early is uncomfortable. Waiting for your entry trigger instead of jumping in early is uncomfortable. Rules force you to embrace discomfort because discomfort is often where your edge lies. Trading your rules requires detaching from the need for control. Emotions often arise because you want certainty in an environment that offers none. The moment you try to force predictability, your decisions become emotionally driven. Rules help you accept uncertainty because they define what you will do regardless of what the market chooses to do. You are not controlling the market, you are controlling your behavior. This shift from external control to internal control is what gives you psychological stability. Another essential element of rule-based trading is repetition. Following your rules once or twice does not create change. Following them consistently across hundreds of trades builds new habits and rewires the emotional patterns that previously controlled you. At first, sticking to your rules feels unnatural because your emotions have been making decisions for a long time. But with enough repetition, rules become your default operating system. Emotional impulses lose power because your mind adapts to the structure you've created. Journaling plays a critical role in reinforcing rule-based behavior. After every session, reviewing whether you followed your rules provides accountability. You begin to see patterns, how often you deviated, what emotions triggered the deviation, whether the deviation helped or hurt you. The more you see the consequences of emotional decisions laid out clearly, the stronger your commitment becomes to letting rules guide your actions. Journals reveal the truth that emotions try to hide. Breaking rules almost always leads to negative outcomes over time. Trading your rules is not about robotic behavior or eliminating intuition. It's about creating a disciplined framework that allows intuition to operate only within defined boundaries. Intuition without structure becomes impulse. Intuition within structure becomes insight. When your rules handle the critical aspects, risk, entries, exits, your mind becomes free to observe the market with clarity. You are no longer blinded by fear or urgency. You see the chart for what it is instead of what you want it to be. The more strictly you adhere to your rules, the more predictable your performance becomes. Predictability reduces anxiety. Reduced anxiety increases patience. Increased patience improves execution. Better execution compounds into confidence. Confidence reinforces discipline. This positive cycle begins only when rules take precedence over feelings. When your emotions run the show, you live in a cycle of inconsistency, brief confidence followed by sudden doubt, moments of discipline followed by impulsive sabotage. Trading your rules is ultimately about shifting your identity from a reactive participant to a controlled operator. It is the mindset where you stop trying to win the market and focus instead on executing your edge with unwavering precision. Your power doesn't come from predicting direction. It comes from following a repeatable process that produces results over time. Accepting uncertainty as the cost of participation means recognizing that the market is not a puzzle to be solved or a code to be cracked, but an environment where probabilities rule every outcome and nothing is ever guaranteed. Most traders approach the market with an unconscious desire for certainty. They want assurance that the trade will work, that the signal is reliable, that the next candle will move in their favor. This desire for certainty creates tension, fear, hesitation, and emotional turbulence because the market does not provide certainty under any circumstances. Every moment is unique, every move is influenced by countless visible and invisible factors, and no pattern repeats in exactly the same way. When you resist this truth, you create internal conflict. When you accept it, you begin trading from a place of freedom. Uncertainty is not a flaw in the market, it is the essence of the market. Prices move because traders hold different beliefs and expectations. If everyone agreed on direction, there would be no movement at all. This diversity of beliefs is what generates opportunity, but it also generates risk. When you accept uncertainty, you stop expecting the market to behave according to your predictions and start interacting with it based on probabilities. Instead of trying to be right, you focus on managing outcomes. Instead of trying to control the market, you control your risk, your behavior, and your execution. Many traders struggle with uncertainty because they interpret it as danger. They believe that uncertainty means vulnerability, that unpredictability means the possibility of loss, and that loss means failure. This chain of meaning creates emotional pressure that disrupts clarity. But loss is not failure. Loss is a statistical event that plays a role in every profitable trading system. The more you try to avoid losses, the more you sabotage your execution. You exit too early, skip valid setups, or wait for perfect confirmation that never arrives. Accepting uncertainty requires breaking the connection between uncertainty and personal threat. When uncertainty no longer equals danger, your decisions become rational instead of defensive. One of the most powerful steps in accepting uncertainty is redefining what it means to be wrong. Most people grow up in environments where being wrong is judged, criticized, or punished. This conditioning carries into trading, creating an emotional aversion to losses. Traders hesitate because they fear being wrong. They hold losers because they don't want to admit they were wrong. They double down on bad positions to avoid accepting that the original decision was wrong. But in trading, being wrong is not only normal, it is unavoidable. Even the most successful traders are wrong a significant percentage of the time. Accepting uncertainty means accepting that being wrong is a natural part of the process, not a reflection of your abilities or intelligence. Another layer of uncertainty emerges from the uniqueness of each market moment. No two setups are identical, even if they look similar. The context, volatility, liquidity, participants, and external conditions are always changing. This means that no matter how perfect a setup appears, there is always a possibility that it won't work. When traders expect replication instead of variation, they set themselves up for emotional shock. Accepting uncertainty means acknowledging that every trade has an unknown element. And that unknown element is what makes trading both challenging and rewarding. When you embrace uncertainty, you begin to view the market as a probability landscape rather than a predictable machine. Every edge you use, whether it's based on price action, indicators, volume, or structure, is designed to give you a statistical advantage over many trades, not a guaranteed outcome on each individual trade. This shift in perspective allows you to approach each trade with neutrality. You no longer demand that the market move in your favor. You no longer feel betrayed when a setup fails. You no longer chase trades out of fear that you'll miss something important. Instead, you execute your plan with calmness because you understand that one trade does not define your success. Accepting uncertainty also strengthens your relationship with risk. When you fear uncertainty, you attempt to use position size as a way to force outcomes. You either risk too much to try to guarantee returns or risk too little because you don't trust your edge. Both reactions distort your performance. When you accept uncertainty, you size positions based on logic rather than emotion. You understand that proper. Risk management is what keeps you in the game long enough for your edge to express itself. Another critical part of accepting uncertainty is letting go of the illusion of control. Humans are naturally wired to seek control, and when something unpredictable happens, the mind feels threatened. This leads to overanalysis, overtrading, constant chart monitoring, and the relentless search for the perfect strategy. But no amount of analysis will remove uncertainty. No strategy will provide guaranteed results. No indicator will eliminate the randomness embedded in price movement. When you release the need for control, you begin to trade with significantly less stress. You rely on structure instead of prediction. You follow your process instead of trying to force outcomes. Traders who accept uncertainty develop patience because they understand that opportunities come in cycles. They don't feel pressured to trade every day or every session. They don't panic when the market is slow or range-bound. They don't feel compelled to manufacture trades during dull periods. Patience becomes natural because they no longer measure progress by frequency of action, but by quality of execution. Accepting uncertainty also opens the door to emotional resilience. When uncertainty is expected, nothing catches you off guard. A sudden spike doesn't trigger panic because you understand that volatility is part of the environment. A losing streak doesn't break your confidence because you know losses cluster naturally. A choppy session doesn't frustrate you because you know it's simply a phase, not a personal attack. Emotional resilience emerges from alignment with reality, the reality that uncertainty is permanent. As you internalize this truth, you start experiencing the market from a place of clarity instead of fear. You see the difference between randomness and opportunity. You stop interpreting normal market behavior as threats. You stop reacting emotionally to unexpected outcomes. Your mind becomes lighter. Your decision-making becomes cleaner, and your execution becomes consistent because nothing in the market violates your expectations anymore. Protecting capital before seeking profits is the mindset shift that transforms trading from a reckless pursuit into a sustainable profession. Many traders enter the market with the belief that success comes from finding the perfect strategy, the ideal entry, or the magical indicator. They obsess over profits, focus on winning trades, and measure progress by how much they make rather than how much they keep. But trading is not a game of maximizing wins, it is a game of minimizing unnecessary losses. Every consistently profitable trader understands that capital is the foundation of opportunity. Without capital, there is no strategy to execute, no edge to apply, and no future in the market. Protecting capital isn't a conservative approach. It is the most aggressive form of professionalism because it keeps you in the game long enough for your edge to work over time. When traders prioritize profits over protection, their behavior becomes distorted. They take oversized positions because they want faster returns. They average down because they hope the market will turn in their favor. They skip stop losses because they don't want to lock in a loss. They trade during low-quality conditions out of impatience. They chase moves that have already passed because fear of missing out overrides logic. All these decisions have one thing in common. They expose capital to unnecessary risk. The truth is that profitable trading is not about how much you make when you're right. It's about how much you avoid losing when you're wrong. Even the strongest strategy collapses when capital is poorly managed. Protecting capital begins with understanding the nature of risk. Risk is not something you eliminate, it is something you control. Every trade carries an inherent possibility of loss no matter how perfect the setup appears. Accepting this reality allows you to approach the market with a defensive mindset. This doesn't mean avoiding trades. It means ensuring each trade has a predefined level of acceptable loss. When you define risk before entering the market, you take control over what the worst-case scenario looks like. This removes uncertainty from the emotional equation because you know exactly what you are willing to sacrifice for the opportunity. One of the most powerful tools for protecting capital is risk management through position sizing. Position sizing determines how much exposure you take based on the volatility of the market and the size of your account. Many traders lose money not because their strategy is flawed, but because their positions are too large relative to their account. A single wrong trade becomes devastating. Proper position sizing ensures that no single trade can significantly harm your account. It also helps maintain emotional stability. When your risk is small enough that a loss doesn't cause distress, your mind stays clear and your decision-making remains rational. Stop losses are another crucial component of capital protection. A stop loss is a commitment to limit damage when the market moves against you. Without one, losses can grow uncontrollably, turning a manageable situation into a catastrophic one. Many traders avoid using stop losses due to fear of being prematurely stopped out, but this fear is rooted in ego. The purpose of a stop loss is not to guarantee perfect exits, but to prevent emotional or impulsive decisions from magnifying losses. A stop loss is essentially a boundary that protects you from the unpredictable nature of price movement. It respects the fact that the market does not care about your predictions or your expectations. Protecting capital also requires knowing when not to trade. The market is not always offering opportunity. Some conditions are choppy, slow, erratic, or overly manipulated. Trading during these periods increases the likelihood of losses, not because you lack skill, but because the environment lacks clarity. Discipline in waiting for your ideal setups is one of the strongest forms of capital protection. Impatience often leads to forcing trades that have no edge. When you trade only when your conditions are met, you reduce the frequency of low-quality entries and increase the consistency of your results. Another important aspect of capital protection is emotional regulation. Emotional decisions tend to be expensive decisions. Revenge trading, overtrading, doubling down after a loss, chasing impulsively, and abandoning your plan are all emotional reactions that compromise your capital. When emotions take over, logic disappears, and the main casualty is your account balance. Protecting capital means maintaining emotional neutrality, especially after losses or during high volatility moments. The calmer your internal state, the more capable you are of making decisions based on logic, structure, and rules rather than feelings. A deeper layer of capital protection involves understanding the concept of drawdowns. Drawdowns are natural phases where your account temporarily declines due to a series of losing trades or unfavorable conditions. Professional traders recognize that drawdowns are inevitable. They do not panic or attempt to force their way out of them. Instead, they respond with discipline. They reduce position size, reassess market conditions, and follow their plan with even more precision. Amateurs do the opposite. They increase risk in an attempt to recover quickly, which often accelerates the decline. Protecting capital during drawdowns is what enables you to stay in the game long enough for the market to return to favorable conditions. Capital protection also requires keeping your expectations aligned with statistical reality. Many traders blow accounts because they expect the market to deliver fast, dramatic returns. This expectation leads to unnecessary risk-taking. But trading is a long-term game. Small, consistent gains compound over time. Protecting capital ensures that compounding is possible. When you avoid large losses, your account grows steadily, and the power of compounding becomes your advantage. A trader who protects capital can survive bad periods, learn from mistakes, and build skill progressively. A trader who risks too much may never recover from a single bad decision. Another fundamental principle is that protecting capital gives you psychological freedom. When your capital is safe, you trade with confidence. You don't panic when the market retraces. You don't fear losing setups. You don't act out of desperation. This creates a mental state where clarity becomes possible. Clarity produces consistency. Consistency leads to profitability. Protecting capital is not merely a financial strategy, it is a psychological foundation that stabilizes your entire trading approach. Lastly, protecting capital is an expression of respect for the market. The market rewards those who approach it with humility and discipline. It punishes those who act with arrogance or carelessness. When you prioritize protection, you're acknowledging that the market can do anything at any moment and that your job is not to predict but to prepare. This humility builds longevity, and longevity is what allows skill, edge, and experience to translate into meaningful results over time. Consistency in execution beats accuracy in prediction because trading is not about knowing what the market will do next. It is about responding the same way every time your conditions are met. Most traders enter the markets believing that their success depends on the ability to forecast price direction with precision. They search for indicators that predict reversals, patterns that guarantee continuation, or news that promises certainty. But the reality is that prediction is inherently unreliable because the future is always uncertain. What separates consistently profitable traders from struggling ones is not the ability to guess correctly, but the ability to act consistently regardless of the outcome of any individual trade. Execution is the one element you control fully, while prediction is nothing more than an educated assumption shaped by probabilities. When traders focus on prediction, their mindset becomes outcome dependent. Every decision feels heavy. Every market fluctuation feels personal. A winning trade reinforces their belief that they were right, while a losing trade feels like a failure. This emotional roller coaster disrupts stability and clouds judgment. Consistency becomes impossible because the trader is constantly shifting approaches based on recent outcomes. They change strategies after a losing streak, tweak indicators after a failed setup, or abandon rules because of temporary discomfort. The result is a fragmented approach with no continuity, no structure, and no long-term edge. Consistency in execution requires shifting the focus from the outcome of each trade to the quality of the process. A process-driven mindset acknowledges that the goal is not to win every trade, but to apply an edge repeatedly over hundreds or thousands of trades. An edge is simply a probabilistic advantage that, when executed consistently, produces profitability over time. But an edge is useless if applied inconsistently. Many traders have systems that would work if followed correctly, yet they rarely follow them with discipline. They enter early, exit late, skip setups, or change risk parameters based on emotions. In doing so, they destroy the statistical foundation that makes the edge valid. Execution consistency begins with having a clearly defined set of rules for entries, exits, risk management, and trade management. These rules must be objective and unambiguous so that they remove discretion from the moment of decision. When rules are vague, emotions fill the gaps. When rules are precise, execution becomes mechanical. Mechanical does not mean thoughtless, it means structured. The more structured your decisions are, the less room there is for emotional interference. A crucial part of consistent execution is understanding that randomness plays a role in every sequence of trades. You can have a setup that wins 70% of the time and still lose 5 trades in a row. You can have a strategy that loses only 30% of the time and still experience a streak of consecutive losses. If your focus is prediction, these streaks will shake your confidence and push you to make emotional changes. But if your focus is execution, these streaks are simply part of the statistical landscape. You learn to expect randomness instead of fearing it. You learn to stay consistent instead of reacting impulsively. This is where discipline transforms into an advantage. Your competitors are destabilized by short-term variance while you remain steady. Consistent execution also requires emotional neutrality. Emotions distort perception. They cause you to see danger where none exists or opportunity where none should be taken. When you are emotionally attached to outcomes, you begin altering your behavior unconsciously. You might widen stops to avoid accepting a loss, take profits too early to protect a small gain, or enter impulsively because the market is moving quickly. These behaviors destroy consistency. Maintaining emotional neutrality means treating each trade as one of many, not as a referendum on your skill or identity. It means reducing the emotional weight of outcomes so that no single win inflates your ego and no single loss crushes your confidence. One of the most effective tools for building consistency is developing a pre-trade and post-trade routine. A pre-trade routine prepares your mind to execute objectively. It might include checking market conditions, reviewing risk limits, confirming setup criteria, and visualizing proper execution. A post-trade routine reinforces learning. It involves documenting whether you followed your rules, how you managed emotions, and what you can improve. Over time, this cycle of structured preparation and structured reflection embeds consistency deeply into your behavior. Another factor that strengthens consistency is reducing unnecessary complexity. Traders often believe that more indicators, more analysis, and more information lead to better decisions. But excess information creates confusion and unpredictability in execution. Simplicity builds clarity. Clarity builds confidence. Confidence builds consistency. When your system is simple enough to understand at a glance, your execution becomes smoother, and your decisions become faster and more aligned with your rules. Consistency in execution also means respecting your risk parameters at all times. Risk is the backbone of discipline. When you change your risk size based on emotion, risking more after winning or less after losing, you break the statistical foundation of your strategy. Fixed risk per trade ensures that no single outcome has disproportionate influence on your account or your mindset. This stability is essential for long-term execution. Another critical aspect is patience. Consistent execution means waiting for your setup, not creating one. Markets are filled with noise, and impulsive trades often come from boredom, impatience, or fear of missing out. When you wait for your criteria to align perfectly before acting, you reinforce discipline and reduce the frequency of low-probability trades. Patience is not passive, it is controlled restraint. It is choosing not to act until your edge is present. Consistency also requires trust. Trust in your system, trust in your process, and trust in the law of large numbers. Many traders claim to trust their strategy, but the moment it experiences temporary underperformance, they begin modifying it prematurely. This instability prevents the strategy from ever proving its effectiveness. Trust is built through repetition, executing the same criteria over and over until the results validate the system. Finally, consistent execution is what creates the compounding effect necessary for long-term success. When you follow your process without deviation, your data becomes meaningful. You can measure performance accurately, identify patterns, refine the system, and evolve with the market. Inconsistent execution creates inconsistent data, making growth impossible. Consistency compounds not only capital, but also skill, discipline, and psychological resilience.